You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in Northport, Florida. I've got a very, 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 very special guest in the house. Not just a very, 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 very special guest in the house. That would be Mr. Billy Carlson. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I think you're maybe overselling a little bit, but I'll take it.
I don't know. I'm feeling pretty eager today. I don't know what that's all about, but I'm
Okay.
kind of feeling energized and ready to go. And we've got some crazy things happening out there in the water. And I put the hurricane watch information and hurricane information out to talk about it later, but it seems like it might not be a bad idea to talk about it a couple times, one at the beginning of the show and one towards the end, to remind people that we have hurricane season coming up. June 1st is the whopper of the big day, isn't it?
It is. That's I believe it's next Thursday. Hurricane season is upon us, and
We're not, yeah.
as it seems to be the case the last several years, hurricane season's actually started in May, where we've gotten our first, I believe the last couple of years now, we've got our first named storm in the middle of May. It took us a little longer to get some of the heavier rains this year, but, we've had some over the last couple of days. And then, of course, I see this morning, oh, hey, we've got a tropical watch, and then I pull up, let me just pull up the Hurricane Center's page, the NOAA page. And sure enough, there's that tropical activity off the Atlantic coast. Granted, at the time this morning, it was only a 10% chance of cyclone formation in the next, 2 to 7 days. And that's back down to 0% at this point. So who knows if anything comes of that. But it was, a stark reminder to see that already when, we're talking about it's May 22nd. We're not even technically hurricane season. But in reality, the way things have gone the last few years, Florida's hurricane season has started early. And so it's important to talk about it. I mean, hey, we're all still recovering from Hurricane Ian.
There's still blue tarps and all kinds of tarps and people living in campers, and we are a city defined by what happened to us last year, and we're not alone. You could actually say we're a state like that. One of the things I'd like to ask.
Okay.
And I think it's pretty blunt. Okay.
Sure.
Do you think we're ready to do it again?
It's hard to say, because for something like Ian, I don't know how ready you can really be for something like that.
Correct.
It's something that was a storm. I've lived in Florida my entire life. I like to think that every year I'm ready come hurricane season. We've got extra water stocked up, we've got extra canned foods and stuff stocked up. So, if we lose power for a day or two, we're good. I have legitimately never experienced anything like sitting in the eye wall of a Cat 5 hurricane for 6, 7, 8, whatever it was, hours. Like there's only so much preparing you can do for something like that. But we've done a pretty good job to this date, picking the pieces back up and putting things back together. And I think anybody is really as ready as they can be when you consider, again, we still have people that haven't gotten roofs fixed. They haven't even got back in their homes yet. Hurricane is something we're still very much dealing with. And I don't think anybody wants to think about the prospects of dealing with another hurricane at this point. But at the same time, you understand it can happen. And like you said, it's never too early to start preparing. We get into May, and I just, out of habit, when I'm grabbing water at the grocery store, I'll grab an extra case. Again, I'm not hoarding, but if I'm there buying one, I'll just grab an extra just to be safe, because you just don't know.
So I'm gonna stick on the bold questions here real quick. Do you think staff is energized or re-energized enough right now within the city buildings on a mental note to re-engage with hurricane season starting back up, knowing full well knowing that our waters are way too hot right now. They are way too hot.
So I think, again, we've done a pretty good job of picking up the pieces, and I think there's going to be a certain level of PTSD for some of us who never left the job essentially for the first week, for the first month. I know some of our first responders they worked tirelessly for probably the first 2 weeks after the hurricane, never really got
Sure
a
enough.
break.
Sure enough.
Um, but 6 months later, we've had time to kind of get get back and assess things and what can we do better. And yeah, I certainly think there's certainly a feeling of more preparedness. I think I know, speaking from my perspective, we had a couple meetings leading into last hurricane season, and even in the middle of the hurricane season, where we were talking about, hey, this is what we should plan on, have this ready, have that ready. We'll be ready to go, and that way, if something happens and you have to be here for a couple of days, you'll be prepared. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, yeah, that's great, but I've lived here my entire life. I just don't see that happening. And now, obviously, it's happened, and I know I myself, because I live out north of 75. I couldn't get home for the first week after the storm, so I spent a lot of time at City Hall and burned through my snacks and all the extra clothes. So maybe I'm a little more prepared for the next one. Messaging wise, we've got a better idea now. I think you experience something like that where you're dealing with worst case scenario, where we had the entire city without power and a good
Absolutely.
chunk of the city was flooded. Now that we've experienced this, now we know, we've got a better idea of the key messaging points, what worked last time and what didn't, and how can we do a better job this time around. And that's, we still are meeting leading up to hurricane season to make sure we have that stuff in place, and we're better prepared for, hopefully, we've talked about this before, hopefully we don't have to experience it ever again. But we're preparation wise, we're in a better place, I think, than we were, I'd say, September 27th last year.
Absolutely. I want to stick with the. I'm still gonna zing them at you here real quick because I want you to educate the public on what the city as a whole in general, but what Public Works did on their initial exit from Hurricane Ian into the oh yeah, we're still cleaning up, but we got to move on
Mhm.
stage. I know we had some exit meeting strategies, and you were kind of talking about those. Tell me what the meaning is behind those and how you felt staff handled that and where the engagement went and what you think is going to be different if we do get another Ian.
So again, it goes back to, we experience things we haven't experienced before. We saw roadways washed out that we hadn't seen before. We saw just the mass amount of tree damage and street signs and traffic signals. And so when we got on the backside of Hurricane Ian, and we've begun to put the pieces back together, and we're assessing things going forward, you get a better idea of, this is where we saw the most damage. How can we harden this? This is where we saw the most issue with floodwaters. How can we evaluate? Let's evaluate what we can do better, how we can better prepare ourselves going forward, to deal with these things. And again, we've spoken about it before. The mass amount of water that we saw because of how long Hurricane Ian was here, and the storm surge and the rainfall and everything, there's only so much you can do to prepare for something like that. Our waterways were as low as possible. We've examined what we've talked about with the price widening project. We've examined the waterway crossings and what we can do to better prepare those going forward. And applying these lessons to now, when we get to the price widening project and we begin the road construction, now we know this has happened, and it's not as far fetched as somebody might think. Let's incorporate that into design. Let's harden these roads. Let's harden the waterways around these roads so that we can avoid kind of, I don't want to necessarily say chaos, but some of the issues that we saw. When you're talking about Price Boulevard being shut down for a month after the storm was obviously less than ideal for everybody. Anybody living on any of the crossroads had major issues getting anywhere while Price was still closed. So, if we can avoid that going forward, especially as we work to widen Price Boulevard, and harden ourselves for future storms, that's obviously what we want to do.
Do you feel like the waterways that were washed out last year with the amount of water, and I gotta tell you, that was a tremendous amount of water that was not just shed on top of us, but because we have everything north of us coming our way,
Right.
uh, you know, we received 10 times the amount of water that we normally would have gotten from a storm. So there was a huge amount of pressure put on our waterways at that point. That people talk about the 1990 storm. Chuck has been on and mentioned it a couple times, and I I got to tell you, I don't think we've ever had a storm like that, and I don't think we've ever had that amount of water uh, being put on us for that length of time.
Right.
And those are factors that we normally don't deal with on a regular basis, but we've now had those roadways washed out. We've rehardened them.
Right.
Do you feel like if we, and I don't want to measure this on the same, but do you think we're if we had half of Ian now, do you think that those roadways, because of how they were put back, are they going to disappear quicker, or do you think they're going to be more substantial?
Well, I think if we're talking about half of Ian, I feel like the way we put things back together, we obviously did that with the future in mind. We're not going to just slap it together with popsicle sticks and glue. We did what we can to harden those waterways. Now ahead of the price widening project, we'll probably harden them even more because now we're talking about a 4-lane roadway, and we definitely want to keep that open. And we have the benefit of we're working on this roadway anyway. Let's maximize how much we can harden it. But the way we put it back together, I do feel like if we're talking about half of Ian, we're certainly more prepared this time. And I certainly expect the roadways to hold up better this time. If we get another Ian, it's hard to say. It's hard to say how something like that could turn out when you're talking about a Cat 5 hurricane. You're talking about maximum winds around 155, and the storm surge that it brought and the rainfall that it brought. And, I tried to explain this to some friends that have moved to Florida within the last 2 or 3 years. You usually get the eye. You usually get that period for an hour or two where everything's calm. You've seen the front of the storm. Now you've got some calm, and then you see the back of the storm, and it moves on, and there's some damage, there's some rainwater, and you move along. And we didn't get that this time. So to sit in a storm like that in the eye wall for as long as we did, again, you can try and prepare as best as possible. How do you prepare for something like that?
Well, and I want to kind of hit something here real quick because the weather service had a lengthy discussion during our our whole episode with Ian. We only had 10 hours that they could talk about things.
Right.
So while we all had internet and access and we were all listening, a couple things that they sort of pointed out towards the end, which I think we should talk about as local people now. I think we should engage in really like a factual track mechanism at this point, because when Charlie came through, Charlie pretty much went up the same route and dug a trench in the floor of the Gulf.
Okay.
And they pointed that out during Ian, and what they followed that up with was Ian then spent about 10 hours digging it deeper than the fast moving Charlie. Um, if at all you believe that hurricanes get caught in a directional dig out that they did the year before or a decade before, we have a greater shot this year of a hurricane coming into the Gulf and
Sure.
following that same line because of how the waterway was. And I'm not talking waterway, I'm talking the flooring has
Right.
been carved. I am going to get some people on and go a little bit deeper into this other than Northport Public Works. But the reason I point that out is that, you know, as we evaluate what we do as a city, and Southbound does the same thing, I think we have to get people more on track earlier to prepare themselves. And I'm going to point out a couple complaints, and I want you to keep in mind that these are triggered to have open dialogue. They're not a negative towards the city at all.
Okay.
Um, but you know, we had people that ended up on islands in our town because of the roadways collapsing. We had other people who decided that they were more important than everybody else because they wanted to go be looky loos and they wanted to get out on the closed bridges that were closed for a reason.
Right.
So my question is kind of built into two strategies here. The first one being people need to be prepared for more than 2 days of water
Absolutely.
and supplies. So I want you to hit on that. And the second side of that is when roads are closed and police officers aren't there, can you tell the citizens I won't tell my verbiage. I'll let you do the professional verbiage because
Sure.
when I was standing on the bridge telling everybody to stop, there's a lot of people that are just really self-centered individuals. They didn't really understand that what was left of the roadways were necessary for really emergency beyond emergency at that point because
Right.
we had a capability of getting a fire truck back or capability of getting an ambulance back in a crunch situation. But the more people drove on those roads and ignored safety first, road closed,
Right.
it destroyed a lot more of the road than needed to be destroyed. So my question is twofold. Should we be ready as citizens and how ready should we be? And then talk about the road closures.
Absolutely. So, like you said, the one thing this taught us is that it's definitely like you said. Some people were on an island. My wife and kids were home during the storm, and thankfully our home held up. We didn't see any of the massive water damage that others saw. I know I have close friends whose master bedroom, the roof caved in and water comes gushing in. We thankfully didn't have any of those issues, but they were not on an island because we're out where the water was deepest. And we thankfully were prepared for a few days. I wasn't necessarily prepared to not be able to get home for 8 days personally, but thankfully we had family that didn't live in that end of town we could go stay with for a couple days. But we've seen that it's possible, and so the message I would give to people ahead of this hurricane season is don't wait until the day before when everybody's rushing out to get extra water and everybody's rushing out to get extra, canned foods and things like that. And everybody's rushing out because we saw it for the days leading up to the hurricane. Everybody's at the gas station filling up 5, 6, 7 gas tanks, to run their generators. So obviously gas has a shelf life, but within reason, be prepared. Have some gasoline on hand if you've got a generator. Have some extra water at home. Um, if you're able, if you have a deep freezer, stock up on extra ice, to keep that packed. Propane for your grills, propane for your generator. If you have the generator that can run on propane, definitely be prepared for more than 2 or 3 days. And I think that was the thing that caught us by surprise with this really was just how much water it brought with us. And having lived out in the estates now for 11 years, 12 years, I've never seen anything like that. We were on the dry side of the neighborhood. Anytime you saw flooding, it was west of Sumter. It was down by Van Camp. It was down by
Yep.
Ponce. It was down by Reisterstown, right off the Myakkahatchee. Um, we're on the dry side, and the water was up to our mailbox for a good 4 or 5 days. I
Yeah,
had I had the chance.
there was no dry side.
Right. So I had the chance to go out with Good Morning America on a ride along on one of the airboats 4 days after the storm, and the water was still up to the exit ramp at 75 in Sumter. Going around my neighborhood, again, the dry side, still very much just an interconnecting weave maze of rivers and streams. The only dry land was where the houses were sitting. So as we get into this next hurricane season, and as we've seen that this is now possible, it's possible for us to be stranded on an island for more than a couple of days. Please just be prepared. Have an extra case of water. If you've got 5 or 6 people living in your home, maybe have a couple extra cases of water.
2 weeks of supplies.
Right.
I mean, truthfully, the preachings go like this: 2 weeks of supplies, be stranded for 2 weeks and be able to survive. I ran into several people who said, we didn't think it was going to be bad, so we didn't buy any water. So we had to drive. Okay. And then the follow-up to that was, and we don't understand why the city didn't supply it. Because it was a massive hurricane, and you as a citizen and your own family are supposed to put yourself in survival mode. So I legitimately stood on our streets, and I heard a lot of different stories. You guys were working your tails off. I was taking videos. I was talking to residents, trying to get information out on the air. And I think what I found to be the most frustrating part for me was the amount of people that thought the city right afterwards should be dropping off bottles of water at the end of their road.
Right.
There were major issues that were far beyond water bottles at the end of a road that the city of Northport was dealing with.
Well, and it's not as simple as, hey, we're going to get 30 cases of water and just drive them to the end of the street. There was a massive level of coordination between the city of Northport, Sarasota County, FEMA, the state, National Guard to get as many supplies as we could. And the initial supply drop-off point was over by San Pedro. And we tried to, and again, this is one thing that now that we've experienced it, now that we've seen people's feedback, now that we've seen how things are going to go, we're better prepared. But as water levels go down and areas become a little more accessible, I was at the San Pedro supply site when it opened up, and I witnessed with my own eyes they were loading up the City of Tampa Police Department had their high water vehicle down here. They were loading up cases of water and MREs and things like that to try to get to as many of the flooded neighborhoods as they could to bring them supplies. But it's a matter of access. A lot of the roadways, we just didn't know how badly they may have been washed out. We knew Price was in bad condition, but how bad, we didn't know. We knew it was bad enough to block it off and ask people not to drive on it. When you're talking about entire stretches of Cranberry were underwater, entire stretches of Biscayne were underwater, Salford underwater, big chunks of Chamberlain underwater. Anything you can do to reduce the traffic on those roadways until we know what the road conditions are, that's what we were doing. And as we could get more supplies in there, we did, but the emphasis, at least initially, was medical emergencies, getting folks who needed medical attention, immediate medical attention, out if we could. I know I spoke with a few people through our Facebook Messenger who needed, medications because what they had to be refrigerated, or had to be kept cold, and they were running out of ice and they needed help and they needed more. And so we had emphasis on that and getting life-saving care to those people. But like you said, going into this next season, please be prepared that the idea that your neighborhood could be flooded again for 4 or 5, 6, 7 days. Be prepared that you've got the water, you've got the canned goods, you've got things that you don't necessarily need power for, to stay fed and stay hydrated and stay safe.
I'm going to throw this up on the screen here real quick. We have an amazing internet. Here's the fantastic thing. You have an amazing internet out there, and we use it for, and I'm going to call it the BS stuff, the social media stuff, and to try to get information out that way. But a lot of people use it for negative. They beat people up. They beat organizations up. So I'm going to throw a challenge out to people right now that I think they need to hear loud and clear, because a disaster list is readily available online. You don't have to think before you buy. You can just go down your hurricane list and truly just start checking things off.
Right.
It is not the first of the month yet, so you have about 9 days head start on everybody else. And I think that one of the biggest things I want to point out is right here, and it's cash. When banks close down and everything shuts down, people forget credit cards don't really work that well when there's no electric.
Right.
They're not writing things down. They're tracking by number. And numbers are bills. And so they can get $5 worth of gas. You got a $5 bill, you can get gas. So make sure you have cash on hand. That's a huge, huge asset when it comes to a hurricane setting by itself.
Definitely.
And just remember that when you're dealing with cash during that time frame, it does make it easier to buy the fuel that you didn't buy before the hurricane.
Right.
If you can find it. But that's one of the items. But if you go through and you start looking at the checklist online, there is nothing that you will forget. It is right there. And the other side of it is, and you can talk on this, Billy, but we have, and I've worked in the hurricane shelters here in Northport. You have got to be prepared to go to one on the mental side of things. It is not, I don't want to go because I don't want to go. I got to tell you, if you live in an older home, or you live in a mobile home, or you live in a wood frame home that's older, there's no reason to risk it. And there are people out there that made statements, and when I was out interviewing them, that I had to go home because I wanted to make sure my house was okay. Okay. So the people who made sure their businesses were okay on Fort Myers Beach, they're not here to talk about it anymore, and neither are their businesses.
Right.
I talked about the story. I've talked about it until I'm blue in the face, and I'm not going to stop talking about it during the hurricane season, because they interviewed a couple waitresses / managers at Hooters on Fort Myers Beach. And to this day, nobody can find me the post interview of them surviving.
Right.
Because they said, we have got to stay. We've been here for all the storms. We've got to make sure the restaurant's okay. Well, when the restaurant ends up washed out in the Gulf,
Right.
so do you. That building is not going to protect you. Uh, there's only a few buildings that I would think that in this day and age would survive anything of that magnitude that we received. And
Right.
and really, I've got friends that are in St. James City. They are literally just getting things back up and running. Uh, there are people in St. James City who have legitimately not gotten back in their house yet. They are living in trailers in their driveway,
Right.
hoping that things are not going to be bad this year. And I don't want them to be bad. I don't want them to be bad at all. I hope we don't get anything. I watched a video of potentially what could happen to us this year, and it was called a super El Nino.
Oh,
And
Lord.
nope, that's actually great news for us if it actually happens because of how the current comes across the United States,
Okay.
and it actually blocks us from a lot of the uh, heated water problems that we have because of the shearing, the wind
Okay.
shearing effect of the winds up above. Uh, Hurricanes have to have the perfect storm. They hate wind shearing, hate it. It'll tear them apart.
Right.
If this super El Nino actually happens, coming from the west, California towards us, and we keep that trough exactly like they say, even though we have hot waters in the Gulf, they're predicting right now that we're not going to have major hurricanes because I know I'm finger crossed too, because of the shearing effect that's going to cause coming across the nation and then into our waterways. Um, we actually have spots in Inglewood and the Port Charlotte area that are higher insurance rates, and people who don't live there, they don't realize it. But people up in Venice, they realize it. People in Sarasota, they realize it. They're closer to the water, and there's a wind shearing um, part that goes with your insurance. It's not extra insurance that you get. You just get to pay more for your insurance because
Right.
you're in a wind shearing area and shaded out. It's sort of like the flood zones. Well, wind sharing is the same thing. Insurance companies are data driven, and we've had our blessings and we have not had our blessings with insurance companies who have stayed with this state at this point.
Right.
But there's a lot there's a lot going on in the insurance industry, and what we need to take into consideration as you're looking at things, if you're looking to buy, you're looking to get things fixed up and ready to go, you're looking to purchase from somebody and you're not using a realtor, keep in mind that the more that you do these types of things, um, you get stuck with what you buy. And, just because there's a house sitting there and you're ready to go, if there's open insurance policies on that home and you pay cash and you don't clear it, oh, on you, totally
Right.
on you. And people, they don't disclose, they don't have to, they should. But if there's open insurance policies and you go to buy a house and you don't go through title and you just sign it outright, good luck with that. It's going to be tough for you, and you're not going to get insurance, and you're going to have a hard way to go. Um, this has nothing to do with the city of Northport, nothing to do with any county. It doesn't have anything to do with the state. But the ironic thing is, we're talking about a hurricane that affected a lot of things here in Northport, and the city gets held accountable for a lot of things that it has no relationship with, no interference to put in.
Right.
Um, what you guys are doing in the city is taking care of city city run stuff,
Right.
roads, trash, even the recycling program did not falter under what you guys were doing. Just the talk about real quick the fact that you had to not just take care of trash, take care of water, take care of bridges, take care of the canals, take care of all these check marks. Bam, 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 bam. You also had to arrange where we were going to put all the yard waste and
Right.
manage how to deal with that and
Right.
manage how to get it out of our city. And we're not just talking about a city getting hit. We're
Right.
talking about a city and many surrounding areas getting hit all at the same time. And what's that chaos do with you guys when you're battling not just for Northport, but you're battling to kind of position yourself amongst all of the services around us?
So, one of the things that happened, especially with hurricane debris, is the place where we normally bring our garbage, our bulk garbage, things like that, is to obviously the county landfill. At a certain point, was they were concerned with taking county stuff, and so we had to find homes for all the debris, all the yard waste debris, all the tree debris, all the interior debris. We had to find homes for that until we could get it out of town.
Yep.
And that's why it took us a few weeks, to get the C&D debris collection started. Is we had to have a place that worked, that was away from homes, so we're not staking up somebody's backyard. We had to do soil sample testing to make sure that when we were done, we could bring it back right back to the condition it was in before we got there. Make sure we're not leaving contamination, things like that. I will tell you, before the storm, Monday through Friday, coming into work, I'd probably see Frank a couple times a day. Frank Lama, solid waste manager. And we talk about different things. We talk about recycling. What's going on with recycling? Where can we educate people? What are you seeing out there, Frank? After the hurricane, I think he went 7 days a week for probably 4 or 5 weeks straight after the storm, and I may have seen him once a week for like 5 minutes at the end of the day, as he is trying to coordinate. It wasn't just, hey, we've got trucks in town and they're just going to kind of drive around and collect what they can. The coordination of sending these crews to this area and these crews to this area, and hey, this one is no longer underwater and they were really hard hit. Let's get that up as quickly as possible. Frank spent a lot of time coordinating with those collection crews to try to get that stuff up and pick up the hardest hit areas as quickly as we could. So it was a monumental effort to go from, okay, the storm is gone, now what do we do? The street signs, stop signs, traffic lights. We all saw the condition of the traffic lights after the hurricane. Pretty much everything in town was down, damaged, broken, and it took us a couple weeks. We went around, got the traffic signals back up as soon as we were able to get out to them and fix them. The emphasis for stop signs was on the major roadways, the streets intersecting with major roadways, because they're higher traffic volume, things like that. And you probably saw some of them. We had a stop sign that may have been 3 or 4 feet tall, which is not necessarily up to code, but the emphasis was get it back up as quickly as possible. And then once we've got everything back up, then we'll worry about bringing everything back to code. Street signs. We have one of our biggest complaints now is still that, my street at this intersection still doesn't have a street sign. When are we going to get that back? We are not the only ones in the area trying to get these things back. It's like you said, it hit us, it hit everybody around us, hit our entire region, Fort Myers, Venice, Arcadia, Sarasota, all these places, Charlotte County saw a monumental amount of damage. We had, as of I think a month or two ago, we had over 7,000 street signs, stop signs, and traffic lights that had been repaired. In March and April, I think we got the last of our school zone flashers back in and operating. So the school zones are getting the flashers like they're supposed to. We recently got another batch of about 700 street signs. And so as these supplies are becoming available, we're still getting out there and getting these things back up. There's been, even to this day, we're what, 7, 8 months removed from the hurricane, and we're still working hard to get things back to normal. There's still things that we're chipping away at, whether it's just been supply or whatever the issue has been. We're still working on getting it, and we're still working on getting these things fixed.
It's one of those things that it's a tireless job. Once you get going into hurricane season, it's tireless, and a lot of times, and I'm going to say this out loud, a lot of times it's a thankless job. As
sure.
a city worker, if we don't have anything going on, that it just, your hours are still there. You're still prepping. You're still, we're told as citizens, be prepared for at least 2 weeks to go without services. You guys are planning for us to be without services pretty much all year. Every time I'm positive, and you correct me if I'm wrong. You guys don't hold any meetings at all pre-hurricane, correct?
Any meetings pre-hurricane?
Yeah, you just shoot from the hip. You don't have any preparatory meetings at all, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to call shenanigans on that one for sure.
Yeah, that's I knew that I knew that was going to be the case. But if you guys are holding meetings and you're prepping for everything that could possibly happen,
right?
Why don't we all take a step this year and do the same thing with our families? There's nothing wrong with even reaching out to your neighbors who may be elderly. I know how many I fed last year. I know how many I gave water to. I know how many that were asking for more supplies because they didn't realize how bad it was. Because, the funny thing is they listen to the TV, but it's noise. A lot of them, it's noise. They're not paying attention because their life at, 85 to 95 years old now is living inside and trying to survive just day to day, let alone thinking about, well, there's a hurricane. Well, I've got water. I've got enough supplies. It's just me. And then they end up having to go 2 weeks without anything.
Right.
And we haven't built the relationships with our neighbors like we did back in the 70s and 80s.
Sure.
And there are probably some good people out there still trying to do the same thing in their neighborhood. But I will tell you that the biggest part of Ian that I found out was how many people now remember my name in my neighborhood, and how many people wave at me today compared to prior.
Right.
It was active. It was helping everyone. It was not just me. It was anybody that was at my door. We took people in. We had people living at their house and showering and eating at ours, living in their car and showering in ours. So I'm by no stretch of the imagination am I the only one who's done that, or we are not the only ones that have done that. But I think really if we're talking about city and how you guys handled everything, if it's not a strong A, it's definitely not in the B category, because the cards we were dealt as a city were not fair cards.
Right.
We dealt with every issue that was out there the best that we could, and there was no playbook for Ian for you guys, was there? Truly,
I like we've said. I mean, you can meet. I know when I joined the city in March of 21, I think it was a month or two later, Frank came next door and said, "Hey, we're having this meeting with Sirius Environmental. It's hurricane preparedness. I mean, what are we going to do if this happens? How we're handling debris, stuff like that. If you want to get a picture, sit in, see what's going on. So we do that leading into every hurricane season. Again, and I know we've said this multiple times, I don't know that there are very many people, cities, governments that are fully prepared to withstand the kind of storm that we saw.
Up and down.
And it happened in Fort Myers. It happened here. It happened in Charlotte County. It's and to Charlotte County residents credit, because they experienced Charlie, and it was something that happened so quick it wasn't supposed to happen, and it was overnight. Oh crap! Here it comes right up the harbor. To their credit, I know quite a few people who still live in Charlotte County that said this track looks exactly like Charlie. We have to go somewhere. Um, and for someone like I said earlier, I've lived in Florida for 38 years, and hurricane season, I'll be honest, and I'm sure there are others like me, it's something I've taken for granted. I grew up in Naples. Every year there was a hurricane or a tropical storm. We got a couple days off of school, and then we went back to life like normal. Um, and so that's how I've always seen hurricanes. Hey, if it's a cat one, cat two, we'll put our shutters up. But hey, probably nothing to stress about. We'll get some extra water, a couple cans of Chef Boyardee, whatever. Um, but I can tell you now, having experienced Hurricane Ian, um, I won't take it for granted. And my wife and I have already had the discussion. If it's anything above a cat three, she's taking the kids and they're getting out of town, because for the couple hours that we couldn't be in contact, and I couldn't get a hold of her, she couldn't get a hold of me. They obviously weren't outside talking to the neighbors during the storm, to have no idea what's going on. We don't want to live that again. If you have the ability to leave, do the right thing. Why risk it? Move on. Go to a shelter. Go stay with family. Um, but like I said, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people just like me who we've grown up with hurricanes. It's no big deal until it is a big deal. And like I said, I can tell you, we will be prepared. Hurricane season comes, we're buying 2 cases of water every time we go to the store. We're buying, Chef Boyardee, cans of soup, whatever it is. We're buying extra every time we go to be prepared. Because if you wait till the week of, guess what? It's not going to be there.
Good luck with
So, hurricane season starts next Thursday. Um, but like we said earlier, as we've seen the last couple of years, it starts earlier than June 1st. Realistically, it's been starting in May lately. As we get into the season, please stock up on supplies. Please have a plan in place. Have what's called a go bag. If you've got to go and have a bag of the most important things: change of clothes, your important documents, like you said, cash. Have all that stuff ready to go, so we don't have a situation like we had with some people this year, where we were caught with our pants down. Hey, it's going up to the Big Bend up there. We're fine. Oh, now it's going to Tampa. It's going to be awful for Tampa, but we'll be okay. Oh, now it's supposed to be south of us. Well, that's a little hairy. And then suddenly it's on top of Northport, and we're spending 8 hours in the eye wall, and it's not anything we've ever experienced before. Why chance it? Like I said, we know if we're getting a Cat 4 or 5, the family's out. I'll be here because I have to be here with the city, and I'll be glad to be here and help residents in any way I can. That's what we sign up for. We had countless staff here who were dealing with personal emergencies and their own homes damaged, and they came to show up to work every day for not even normal work hours. They didn't just come 8 to 5. You had guys coming in 6 o'clock in the morning and not leaving until 6 or 7 at night. We had staff working around the clock while they're dealing with their own stuff. So again, we'll be more prepared than last year because we've experienced it. Um, And that's, I would just tell residents, do your best to be prepared yourself. Um, Supplies, food, water. If you've got a generator, gas it up. Have some gas ready to go. Um, don't run your generator inside your house or your garage. Please run that outside. Um, but yeah, just do your best to be prepared.
You know,
And envision worst case scenario. Even
if,
if it
if
doesn't happen, at least you're prepared.
if we're all prepared and it doesn't come, you can still use the supplies.
Exactly.
If you're not prepared, and you've been part of this before, you'll understand that there usually is no place to get supplies.
Right.
And if your plan is to fall back on the city of which you're in because they're responsible for your hurricane or your bad judgment, you're wrong. The city is there not to come and save you because you don't have water. Their job is to get you out if you're getting flooded. Uh, and we had so much going on. There were people that drove from north of Tampa in canoes and boats, John boats, and put them in the waterways. Firsthand, I know this because I jumped on one and went and got a friend.
Yep.
And, there's something to be said. I think when you realize how bad it actually was and you were stuck on the island and you were dry, you were fortunate. Uh,
Absolutely.
you were blessed, even though you didn't have a lot of access to information and people. If you were in that storm at all and you were dry and safe, you had it much better than a lot of people out there. And those people uh, may have been prepared, but I find when you have water coming in, preparation with all that all goes back to what he said earlier, your go bag. And floridadisaster.org, if you need to get a list, go get it. It's online. Just type it in. Hurricane list, needs list. It's pretty simple. I did it right here on screen. If you're listening on the radio, please floridadisaster.org. Go get your list. Get it all filled. Have your stuff ready to go. Know where your documentation is. Know where your medical history is. Get it ready. Have it in a plastic bag so it won't get damp. Everything is ready to go, and let's handle hurricane season now like the pros we should be. And I personally want to thank Billy. I know we talked about hurricanes the whole time, and we've had really great participation online. Real Talk 97.5 FM. Please go check out the Northport Public Works website. Billy, real quick, we've got about a minute left. Talk about the app so people can give updates on signage that they see down so that you can track that better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, we're still waiting on supply in a lot of cases, but if you've got a street sign down, if you notice, even since the storm, more stop signs have gone down, whether it's people hitting them, whether it's people knocking them down on purpose, whether it's people taking the street signs on purpose. If you notice they're missing, if you notice they're damaged, go to North Report. The mobile app is free to download and use. If you go to northportfl.gov/North Report, we have the web app there too. You can go in, choose the concern that you're having, whether it's drainage, whether it's the street signs, things like that. You can go in there, check the problem you're having. If you've got your location settings on, it'll pinpoint right to where you're standing. You can submit the concern there. We have it streamlined with our work order system, so it's instantly created, and you can track. You can call in to Public Works 941-240-8050, and you can ask them about the specific work order, or or you can kind of follow along online. We'll provide updates online as well.
And it's an easy app to use. It's not hard, but the updates you get, they're crazy good. Please keep that in mind. It's 4 o'clock. I got to get off the air. I'm trying to get it up there for you, Billy. There it is, North Report. So make sure you do North Report. Use the app. It's a very effective tool, and it does help everybody get feedback and tracking of what's going on. So thanks for listening, Billy. Thanks for being part of the show. We'll talk to you next month. And everybody be safe out there and get ready for hurricane season. It's just around the corner. Thanks, Billy.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Bye-bye.